Hi everybody, in this video today I'm going to be calling a challenge to all Catholic men and why you should be doing some sort of combat sport and the reasons why, okay? I think if you are someone who takes their faith really seriously, you probably have a pretty good prayer routine. You probably pray every day. You might even pray the rosary every day. Maybe go to mass every day, okay? I don't know what your routine is, but I can guess if you're watching, if you're a traditional Catholic, which is the title of this video, you're probably someone that takes their faith seriously, right? As do I, right? If you guys don't know my story, I had a reversion about 4 years ago where it turned into recessing a lot of what I was doing. I was a very lukewarm Catholic, and you know, a lot of things happened. If you guys want to see that story, I'll put a link in the description below. That's not what this video is about, but I get what you're saying. I get where you're coming from. Now, because you're traditional Catholic, you probably value the virtues, right? The virtues of fortitude, justice, temperance, prudence, faith, hope, and charity, right? I think a lot of guys kind of tend to gravitate, especially traditional guys, gravitate towards the theological virtues, which is faith, hope, and charity, but neglect the temporal or the natural virtues, right? The like prudence, justice, fortitude, okay, justice. Did I say justice twice? I think I did. Yeah, temperance, justice, fortitude, prudence. Yeah, okay, sorry, I forgot that one for a second. But yeah, a lot of guys ignore that, and the reason why is because, not that it's easier to get faith and hope and charity. It's really not. It's actually harder, because if you didn't know, those virtues don't come naturally. They come only directly from God. Like that's just like directly from God, and you have to ask Him for it. Which is, you know, some people ask, like, you know, how do I grow in faith? Well, you say the act of faith every day, and God's going to give it to you. You just ask, right? Asking you receive, seeking you shall find. And that's really how the theological virtues work. It just involves a lot of prayer and a lot of, you know, asking God for that grace. Now, how do you get yourself in a position where when you ask God for something, He's more willing to give it to you, right? We all want to be in that position, right? Especially when it comes to growing in virtue. You do that through the natural virtues, right? You do that through natural virtues. You do that by being prudent, having temperance, fortitude, and justice. And let's talk about all those four briefly and how martial arts can actually help you increase all four of those. So listen up, okay? So temperance. Temperance. What is temperance? Well, temperance is basically controlling your lower passions. Controlling your lower passions. I know a lot of guys who take their faith really, really seriously, but they don't exercise. They don't treat their bodies as temples of the Holy Ghost because they're worried they're going to fall into vainglory. While that is true, some people do fall into vainglory. Just tell yourself from the get-go, you're not training for that reason. You're training to be healthy, right? You're training to treat whatever you're doing as an act of growing, you know, with the intention of growing in temperance, right? Going into controlling your passions and denying yourself, right? Going to the gym, training is hard, right? Which is another thing too. As a man, I think society's gotten so bad to the point that you probably shouldn't train in a public gym lifting weights unless you're going at a time where there's no females around. Because, you know, unfortunately, like fathers have raised their daughters like shit. I'm sorry to swear, because we have so many girls that are just dressed up like in such scandalous ways, that are gonna make men fall into sin. Okay, now before anybody comes on here and be like, well, men, just control your eyes. It's like, okay, you don't know what a man goes through when he's being tempted. Okay, Satan uses that part of our fallen nature, and just saying things like, well, just don't look, that's not helpful. That's not going to help anybody, right? Instead, just, you know, just wear something appropriate, right? You don't need to do that. So I know that's going to rub people the wrong way, but whatever, I'm going to say the truth, I don't care. So, you know, that's something I would avoid. Do some home workouts. If you're someone that's not motivated, which that's me, find a gym. Find a gym where you're going to train some sort of martial art, right? Now, I'm more towards combat sports. That's something that I feel like all men should do. All men should know how to fight, you know, to some degree. Doesn't mean you have to go pro. Doesn't mean you have to actually have any fights in the ring. You don't have to do that. But spar at least once a week. Okay, go to a gym where you're going to do a lot of light technical sparring, kind of build yourself up. And if you're with a group of good guys that are you know, they might be pagan in their lifestyle, but if they are at least good in the virtue of temperance as regards to, you know, training your body, then that's a good place to start, right? Now let's go over to the next one, fortitude. Again, how does martial arts help with that? Fortitude. You have to push yourself when you don't want to push yourself. Okay? And fortitude, what is this? It's the firmness in difficulties. That's what it is. That's what fortitude is. And if you are pushing yourself in martial arts, especially something like Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, which is a hard martial art for a lot of people, right? It's not easy. You're going to be put in positions and situations where it's difficult to get out of, right? And it's gonna make you sweat. It's gonna make you have to overcome a lot of adversity, and that's another way to grow in the virtue of fortitude. Justice. Okay, what is justice? Justice is rendering another what they're due. And this kind of ties into humility, and humility is like the king of all virtues. You know, if you really grasp humility, all the other virtues are going to flow from that. I can't remember what saint said that. If you guys know in the comments below, I believe he said, some monk asked him, what virtue should I work on? You know, what are the top 3 virtues? And he was like, humility, 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 right? And I think Saint Francis of Assisi would say, you know, humility and charity were like the 2 main ones where everything flows from. But yeah, so justice is rendering another what they're due. When you're sparring and when you're training in martial arts, especially if it's your first time, you're probably going to suck at it for a while, right? And what that does is that humbles you, right? Especially if you're doing jiu-jitsu, you have to tap a lot. You know, I can't tell you guys, like, I've tapped like thousands of times and maybe tapped other people a handful of times. You're going to tap out a lot. You're going to be like, you got me a bunch of times. Same thing with boxing, with Muay Thai. You might be in a sparring session, you might be like, oh, hey, hold up. This is too much. I need to slow things down. You know what that does to a man's ego? It kills the ego. Okay, we got to kill the ego. That's something that's super powerful in the spiritual life. We can't go into heaven being prideful. That's just not going to happen. Look what our Lord Jesus did, right? He came down as a baby, as like an infant, right? He washed his apostles' feet, even though he's like the creation of everything. Like, he lowered himself to that degree, and we're called to do the same. So when you're doing any kind of striking martial art, you might have to slow things down, and that's going to humble you. You might have to tell people, hey, this is too much. I tell guys in my gym all the time, because a lot of times, you know, other gyms are just macho attitude where you have to like, you just got to bite your teeth down and fight back. And there's times for that. There's times for that when you're fighting, right? When you're competing. But if you're just training like every day, you don't need to do that. You know, you don't need to go hard every single time. And then the next one is prudence, making right decisions. Okay. This one kind of goes hand in hand with temperance a little bit. But prudence, what's that? Well, it's basically in martial arts, if you want to train well, you're going to have to watch your diet. You're going to have to watch what you're eating. You're going to have to, consume less bad things for you, because if you want to not feel like crap the next day, you're going to have to train. You're going to have to like watch what you're eating, right? And that goes hand in hand with temperance. So as you guys can see, martial arts can help you grow in the natural virtues, which support the supernatural virtues, right? St. Thomas Aquinas would say grace perfects nature. So if you're naturally inclined towards those good things, right? Kind of like how Aristotle would talk about, it's also going to make you a holier person, because now you're doing it for the right reasons, right? The difference between a non-Catholic who's training martial arts and the Catholic is that the Catholic is actually going to be using what they're learning in martial arts to help them grow in virtue and become a better person. Not saying that's not possible for someone who's like a pagan, right? Or someone who doesn't worship, Jesus. They're going to grow in natural virtues, and that's okay. But the thing is, there's a story, and I know I'm going off on a tangent, but that's how these videos are going to be. I'm not going to edit or do anything. No flashy thing, edits. I'm just going to talk to you guys like I'm talking to you in person. I can't remember the saint, but there was a missionary trip in the Americas where I believe it was Christopher Columbus. Again, another controversial topic. Christopher Columbus, right? And they were trying to evangelize to the Native Americans. And I might be getting this wrong. It might not have been Christopher Columbus, but basically the tribes that were like skinning people alive or doing crazy stuff like that, they had a hard time accepting Christianity, okay? Which is why, like, even if you think about Our Lady of Guadalupe, like, Our Lady literally had to intervene. She had to intervene and show up because, like, these people were sacrificing children, which is not so different than our culture today. Topic for another video. So they came, and then they found a tribe that actually were living, like, according to the natural virtues. They had one wife, which is very unusual. The men had one wife. They didn't kill each other and harm each other. They lived fairly peaceful, kind of like the kind of quasi Pocahontas type people, the ones that actually existed, which was very, very, very few. Very few. This was an exception, not the rule. They accepted Christianity like that. because they're like, oh, this makes a whole lot of sense to us because we're already growing a natural virtue. Christianity makes sense, and I feel like that's a lot of that for a lot of guys too. Is like if you train martial arts and you just feel like there's something missing, and some guys make this big mistake. They turn martial arts into a religion. They turn it into like a form of self-worship or a form of worshiping their art, which really is just going to leave you empty and hollow. And I know a lot of guys do that as well. But if you look at Catholicism, not like watered down, quasi-Protestant-esque Catholicism, like hardcore, like traditional Catholicism, like think of the Crusaders, think about the men who sacrificed everything to protect the Holy Land. Like think about those men. Think about old school Catholicism, traditional Apostolic Catholicism, traditional Latin Mass, right, or ordinariate form, or just that kind of liturgy, and that kind of tradition. You're going to find that it's going to be very attractive to you. Right. So if you're someone that's not Catholic and you're watching this video and you've watched this long, thank you for watching. But, go to a traditional mass and see how you feel. See what's going on. Right. Because I think a lot of us, in fact, this is true. Like if you're not worshiping the one Lord, Jesus, if you're not worshiping him, you're going to worship something else. Like we are naturally worshiping beings. We're going to worship, like Jesus says in the Gospel of Luke, where your treasure is, there your heart will be also, right? So if you have your treasure in simply just material things like your physical prowess with martial arts, it's not going to really, it's your heart's going to be in the wrong place, because when you die, you're not going to be able to take any of those skills with you. You can take your virtue with you, right? Just like all of us are going to get old and die one day. There's a lot of guys I talk to who think they're just going to live forever. Like, there'll be guys that are like in their 40s and 50s and they still train, and that's great and that's awesome. But then they'll get in stuff like TRT, right? Which is like, okay, there's a reason why you get old. There's a reason why God, has a natural cycle for life, because, you're not meant to, stay as fit in your 20s when you're 50. And I think I say this out of bitterness because there's some guys I train with who are like 45 and I'm 31, and they're just moving so much better than me. And part of me is like, maybe that TRT ain't so bad, because I can keep up with them, and they're way older than me. But that's just my own bitterness coming out. No, that's why I would say, if you're someone who's a traditional Catholic, and I highly encourage you to do martial arts. Try it out, right? And if you need any recommendations on what style to choose or how to pick a good gym, I do have a video about that on my channel, so you can check it out, or you can just ask me in the comments down below. So that's all I have for you guys today. Again, no flashy edits, nothing like that. Not even sure how many people are going to watch this, but I know the right people will. So hope you guys want the rest of your day. Viva Cristo Rey. God bless you guys. See y'all next time.